Nobody knew there'd be a pandemic.
When Trump first talked about the coronavirus earlier this week, I'm not going to lie, it wasn't exactly reassuring.
The coronavirus, which is, very well under control in our country. We have very few people with it. The people are getting better. They're all getting better. And I think that whole situation will start working out. A lot of talent, a lot of brain power is being put behind it. $2.5 billion we're putting in. There's a very good chance you're not going to die.
Okay, we're definitely all going to die.
I've just received another briefing from a great group of talented people. We're ready to adapt and we're ready to do whatever we have to as the disease spreads, if it spreads. The level that we've had in our country is very low and those people are getting better. We're very, very ready for this. I'm going to be putting our Vice President, Mike Pence, in charge. I'm going to ask Mike Pence to say a few words, please. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I still feel safer with him than with Trump. All right? Because Trump, first of all, if you saw the briefing, didn't seem to know anything that we didn't. It's like he just gets his news online with us. Just like, I saw a thing, it looks bad, it's really pretty bad. It's like some people have it, a lot of people have it, you might have it, I don't even know if I have it. And earlier this week, when Trump was briefed on the virus, he seemed less concerned about a pandemic hurting people than he was about it hurting the economy. Because that's Trump's real nightmare, right? If his stock market gets sick, yeah, he would be like, no, not my poor stock market. Not Wall Street. I'll nurse you back to health with my special chicken soup. It's a KFC bucket poured with Diet Coke. Now, leaders all over the world are handling corona in very different ways. You know, some are panicking and some are not doing enough. Luckily for all of us here in the United States, there's one person who isn't worried at all.
We have a report today, the global death rate at 3.4%, and a report that the Olympics could be delayed. Your reaction to that?
Well, I think the 3.4% is really a false number. Now, this is just my hunch. It's because a lot of people will have this, and it's very mild. So I think that number is very high. I think the number, personally, I would say the number is way under 1%.
What the is that? I've got a feeling is a phrase that should only be reserved for low-stakes situations. You know, like whether tonight's gonna be a good night. With coronavirus spreading across the country, I know a lot of people are scared right now. But there is no need to fear, my friends, because you see, the stable genius in chief is on the case.
I like this stuff. You know, my uncle was a great person. He was at MIT. He taught at MIT for, I think, like a record number of years. He was a great super genius, Dr. John Trump. I like this stuff. I really get it. People are surprised that I understand it. Every one of these doctors said, how do you know so much about this? Maybe I have a natural ability. Maybe I should have done that instead of running for president.
Yeah, maybe you should have done a lot of things other than running for president. But this is where we are now. Clearly, Trump is not a natural expert at this. Because he said the vaccine could be ready in a few months. It can't. A couple weeks ago, he said the number of cases would quickly go down to 0. It has been the opposite. He even said that you can't spread the disease if you sneeze with your eyes open. It doesn't help. Last night, the president held an emergency live address from the Oval Office to calm the nation down and to find someone else to blame.
President Trump ramping up his response to the coronavirus outbreak, but instead of reassuring the public, he caused more confusion than calm. Like this statement.
We will be suspending all travel from Europe to the United States for the next 30 days.
The Department of Homeland Security quickly clarifying, assuring the travel restrictions will not apply to U.S. citizens, permanent residents, and some of their family members. The ban instead would only apply to foreign nationals. Trump caused more uncertainty when he said the restriction would apply to trade.
And these prohibitions will not only apply to the tremendous amount of trade and cargo, but various other things.
But Trump took to Twitter to clear up that statement, writing, "It is very important for all countries and businesses to know that trade will in no way be affected by the 30-day restriction on travel from Europe. The restriction stops people, not goods." President Trump further jumbled the message when he addressed the health care costs associated with coronavirus.
Earlier this week, I met with the leaders of health insurance industry who have agreed to waive all co-payments for coronavirus treatments.
A White House official later corrected the notion, saying co-payments would be waived only for coronavirus tests, not for treatments of the disease.
I'm sorry, but this is unbelievable. Like, I would understand if Trump made mistakes, right? If this whole thing was off the cuff. But how is it possible to get so many things wrong in a pre-written speech? This is crazy. Watching an Oval Address shouldn't be a game of two truths and a lie. He's just up there like, the coronavirus is very dangerous. We need to be vigilant. And my babysitter growing up was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. God bless America. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Donald Trump is as freaked out by coronavirus as regular citizens, which is wild because he's the president. And the reason I say that is because it turns out the cameras carried on rolling after Trump ended his speech. And his reaction was priceless.
God bless you and God bless America. Thank you.
We're clear.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. That is not the sound you want to hear from a president after a serious address. Right? FDR didn't reassure the nation by saying, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Okay, Daddy needs a margarita. Can I get a margarita? I need a drink. Oh, they still here? Donald Jehoshaphat Trump, he's the one man we're all forced to listen to during this crisis. And every day, he reminds us why hiring him was America's biggest mistake.
It's very uncharted territory. Could have been stopped pretty easily if everybody had known about it a number of months before people started reading about it. Nobody knew there'd be a pandemic or an epidemic of this proportion. Nobody's ever seen anything like this before.
Yes, everybody, including Trump, didn't know how big this thing was, except for Trump, who knew how big this thing was, but didn't do anything because he didn't know how big this thing was. It makes perfect sense. While more and more countries around the world are shutting down to stop coronavirus from spreading, Donald Jameson Trump is preparing for a grand opening.
America will again and soon be open for business, very soon, a lot sooner than 3 or 4 months that somebody was suggesting. A lot sooner. We cannot let the cure be worse than the problem itself. We're not going to let the cure be worse than the problem.
President Trump now says he wants to reopen the country for business by Easter, even as health officials warn the coronavirus pandemic will continue to worsen in the U.S.
Easter's a very special day for me. And I say, wouldn't it be great to have all of the churches full? You know, the churches aren't allowed, essentially, to have much of a congregation there. So I think Easter Sunday, and you'll have packed churches all over our country. I think it would be a beautiful time.
Now, you don't have to be a genius to see why the president's plan is alarming a lot of people right now. Right? It's not just because it seems way too early, but it's also because he's saying he wants everyone to congregate together in churches around the country, which is the worst idea possible in a pandemic. This is basically every supervillain's wet dream, right? A big event with huge crowds where everyone gets infected by a deadly toxin. Trump is like the Joker, just with more makeup. The big story right now is that President Trump, who usually treats his daily briefings like the last scene in Scarface, came out yesterday and acted for the first time ever like he had also been reading the news.
President Trump just moments ago with a somber tone.
President Trump is taking this darker tone.
He was as grim as he's been through this entire crisis.
I want every American to be prepared for the hard days that lie ahead. We're going to go through a very tough 2 weeks. You're going to start seeing some real light at the end of the tunnel, but this is going to be a very painful, very, very painful 2 weeks.
But while the president may finally be grasping the gravity of this outbreak, he and his allies continue to make excuses for why it took him so long to respond.
Mitch McConnell, he said that impeachment diverted the attention of the government. Do you think that in any way, this was happening and building at the same time, did it divert your attention or your team's attention or the vice president's attention?
Well, I don't like to think I did. I think I handled it very well, but I guess it probably did. I mean, I got impeached. I think, I certainly devoted a little time to thinking about it, right? So, when you say that, yeah.
I acted properly with Corona, but I was also distracted by impeachment. But my response has been perfect, but impeachment is why I messed up.
But on the upside, it seems like he's at least starting to act like he's taking the threats of this pandemic a little more seriously. And I hope he is taking it seriously because, let's be real, this is still Donald Trump, people. All right? I wouldn't be shocked if he acted like this and then tomorrow he comes out like,
April Fools, I'll see you losers on Easter. Did you see me? I acted sad.
President Trump says he thinks doctors should use the drug hydroxychloroquine to treat patients who've tested positive.
That's hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. And again, you have to go through your medical people, get the approval. But I've seen things that I sort of like. So what do I know? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a doctor.
Okay, here's what I don't get. Trump is acknowledging he's not a doctor, while legitimate doctors who could answer these questions are standing right there next to him.
Why are we getting his opinion at all?
He should end all of his coronavirus press conferences like a pharmaceutical ad. He's just come out like,
Donald Trump is not a doctor and his advice should not be taken seriously. If you have an erection lasting longer than 4 hours, please let Donald Trump know, because that's pretty cool.
With nearly 17 million Americans filing new unemployment claims in the last 3 weeks, the president is eager to open the country again for business by May 1st.
I call it the Opening Our Country Task Force or Opening Our Country Councils. I'm going to have to make a decision, and I only hope to God that it's the right decision. But I would say without question, it's the biggest decision I've ever had to make.
On coronavirus specifically, Trump's instincts have been wrong from the start. Luckily, the truth is that America doesn't really need to rely on the president's instincts here. Governors are the ones who lock down their states, and governors are the ones who will decide when to open the states back up. Now, when Trump heard that the states were going to be deciding on whether or not to reopen their economies, regardless of his decision, he was quick to remind people that his business cards might say president, but y'all better treat him like the king.
At the White House, President Trump made the stunning claim that only he has the power to reopen the country, not individual state governors.
The President of the United States has the authority to do what the President has the authority to do, which is very powerful. The President of the United States calls the shots. They can't do anything without the approval of the President of the United States. When you say my authority, the President's authority, not mine, because it's not me. This is when somebody's the President of the United States, the authority is total. And that's the way it's got to be.
Your authority is total.
It's total. It's total.
What provision in the Constitution gives the president the power to open or close state economies? And then
numerous provisions. Will give you a legal brief if you want.
You know, it's crazy how throughout this crisis, Trump has been pushing responsibility onto the governors at every opportunity. Every opportunity. That's what he's been doing. Find your own ventilators. Negotiate for your own PPE. You tell citizens to stay at home. That's not my job. But now that it's getting close to that time when America might be reopening the economy, all of a sudden he's like,
Me, I get to push the button. That's me, I get to do it.
But the truth is, Donald, if you're not there for the battle, you don't get to lead the victory parade. The scientist in charge of the government's efforts to make a coronavirus vaccine suddenly got fired with no explanation. Now, he says it's because he disagreed with President Trump about pushing hydrochloroquine as a miracle drug. And to make things even worse, when President Trump was asked why the guy in charge of finding a vaccine was fired, this is how he responded.
I never heard of him. You just mentioned the name. I never heard of him. When did this happen?
This happened today.
Well, I never heard of him. If the guy says he was pushed out of a job, maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I did have to hear the other side. I don't know who he is.
I don't understand how Trump has never heard of the person in charge of finding the vaccine to the disease that has shut down the entire world. And don't tell me it's because he's too busy. I mean, this is the same man who says he's been watching every nightly news show, plus CNN, MSNBC in the morning, Fox News on weekend afternoons, and even reruns of baseball. Reruns. And let me tell you something. If you have time to watch reruns of baseball, you have time for anything. President Trump created shockwaves of stupidity with his latest and probably greatest unlicensed medical opinion yet.
President Trump offering new but unproven suggestions of how to kill COVID-19 in patients using UV rays and injecting disinfectants such as bleach and alcohol.
Supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that has him in check, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do, either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that, too. Sounds interesting. And then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning, so that you're going to have to use medical doctors with? But it sounds interesting to me.
This is maybe the first time in documented history that we've seen someone not thinking out loud. Now, if you're some random guy on the internet with 12 followers, you can say shit like this and it really doesn't matter. You can say whatever you want about coronavirus. But Donald Trump is not just some random guy. Donald Trump was the star of Celebrity Apprentice. People listen to what he says. So his suggestion about injecting people with a disinfectant has had a massive fallout. As always, when Trump says something insane about the coronavirus, it puts his team of doctors in a tight spot because they have to try and correct him without embarrassing him. And no one tries harder than Dr. Birx.
You didn't believe the president was putting anybody in danger, did you?
No, when he gets new information, he likes to talk that through out loud and really have that dialogue. And so that's what dialogue he was having. I think he just saw the information at the time, immediately before the press conference, and he was still digesting that information.
Bravo, Dr. Birx. Bravo. It is a great defense to not use the word dumb, but just describe what being dumb is to describe Trump. We're learning more about President Trump's unconventional strategy of completely ignoring the pandemic as it was brewing.
Breaking overnight, the Washington Post reports U.S. intelligence officials warned President Trump about the coronavirus threat in at least 12 classified briefings back in January and February. But the Post reports the president, quote, failed to register the threat.
Yes. It's being reported that Trump ignored 12 coronavirus warnings in his daily intelligence briefings. And honestly, I'm not surprised. I mean, if they gave him the information in a briefing, of course he's not going to get it. Because if you really want the president to pay attention, you've got to make that information kid-friendly. Then it sinks in.
So what you're saying is the sick duck got all the other duckies sick, and now that duck has to sit by itself. I get it. Sad duck.